Welcome to another edition of the Routine Jumper Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything NBA basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a ton of things to get into. It is officially the first official full NBA slate of games with practically every NBA team playing. We had a crazy opening night that led off with a double overtime victory by the Oklahoma City Thunder. The debut of NBA on NBC was a success to say the least. Honestly, a really great debut for the program getting the NBA back, and it was actually pretty easy to access too. By the way, no shameless plug for Peacock or anything, but it was an easy way to get to them, easy watch, and an enjoyable experience the entire time watching both the Thunder versus Houston game and the Golden State Warriors versus the Lakers. So we're actually going to start with opening night and then work our way through the rest of the podcast with some interesting takes that I have that I think will kind of be the focus of mine throughout the majority of the regular season. Let's start with thoughts from opening night. Now, I'm not gonna break down the game step by step, everything that I saw, everything that I felt like came from it from a statistical standpoint for you, because plenty of people have probably already done that by the time that this episode drops. So the idea of just simply recapping the game for anybody when you know you can watch it on YouTube or you can watch somebody else give you the play-by-play, that's a waste of time. So I'm going to give you three storylines slash takeaways that I had from opening night that I think will be applicable to the rest of the NBA season and something that will need to be monitored if you are a fan of these teams, or if you're a fan of a team that views any of these four as a real championship contender, which I think you should, then that'll be kind of the main focus to keep mind of. So there's three takeaways in particular. One has to do with the Los Angeles Lakers. One has to do with the Houston Rockets. And then the last one has to do with kind of an overarching theme from something that I saw last night. So let's start with the Lakers because, of course, they're the team that is going to be under the most of microscope this upcoming season, given the fact that at any point LeBron James, obviously could announce that this could be his last year or anything of that liking, right? And plus, they're the Los Angeles Lakers, so duh. My takeaway from this game is that they didn't solve their center position. And the issue may be that they still have that problem in the middle with DeAndre Ayton. Finished the game with 10 points, 6 rebounds. For context, him and Jackson Hayes combined for 12 rebounds. Luka Doncic had 12 rebounds by himself. Luka was out there practically by himself, if I'm being honest with you, through three quarters. It wasn't until the back half of the third quarter, early fourth, that it seemed like Austin Reeves started to come alive. DeAndre Ayton was kind of out there. If I read correctly, statistically, they gave up about 16 points within 5 feet of the basket. Shot like not 16 points. They shot 14 of 21 on shots within 5 feet of the rim. It's practically as if DeAndre Ayton was nowhere close to a real rim protector for this team. And you could kind of tell. Jimmy Butler set the tone. He finished the night with the most points. I think he had about 33 for the Golden State Warriors. And it was clear, obviously one of the biggest things that helped the Golden State Warriors set themselves apart last season when they acquired Jimmy Butler was they were a team that before acquiring Jimmy, they did not get to the free throw line much. They were not a good team at attacking the paint because outside of Stephen Curry, nobody was really effective in terms of drawing real rim pressure. And Jimmy Butler changes that a lot because the element that he adds to the table is his shot creation around the rim and more particularly his ability to play through contact. Well, here's the thing. DeAndre Ayton had one block in this game, but he wasn't impactful. He wasn't a big time rebounder. Actually, he was middle of the pack last season as a defensive rebounder as well. And it goes to show that despite the fact that he's 6'10", 6'11", and the physical specimen that he doesn't use the physicality that he has presentable in order to actually be effective around the glass. I think the biggest worry that I have for the Los Angeles Lakers this upcoming season, despite the fact that obviously there's questions about what they can do as a team defense, the fact that they don't have a lockdown defender. I do think Marcus Smart was relatively good in his minutes, but nobody that necessarily puts fear in you and like, okay, I can trust them on the best perimeter guard or the best perimeter player on the opposing team. The biggest issue, the biggest hole, and it was the same thing last year, is this ability to have consistent rim protection and rim pressure. That's on both sides of the floor. DeAndre Ayton didn't feel like a rim threat at any time as a potential lob threat throughout this game. He didn't feel like somebody that Luka Doncic could dump the ball down to and get 2 or 3 easy, post up touches for points against a Golden State Warriors team that was relying pretty heavily on Draymond Green at center. This was a game that felt like DeAndre Ayton was supposed to come out and at least be a rebounding machine, if anything else, because the Golden State Warriors played relatively small. It was part of the reason why Buddy Hield was able to go off. Jonathan Kuminga at one point was really consistent within this game and had a really nice outing for himself. But all of that had to do with the fact that DeAndre Ayton was practically a non-factor. So my number one takeaway is that the Lakers still have a center problem. And what that means for the future of this team is uh pretty questionable, because at the end of the day, they have the offensive talent, and you could also question that, right? Again, Luka Doncic had 43, but this game and the score is not indicative of how the game actually went. This game was pretty out of reach by the Golden State Warriors initially. Then towards the back half of the third quarter, fourth quarter, Austin Reeves comes alive along with Luka Doncic knocking down some big shots. And then it got within, I think it was 101 to 99. And then I think there was like a TV timeout. Then the Golden State Warriors kind of put the gas back on and did their thing to be able to eventually take the lead and keep to eventually take a distant lead, and then of course keep the win. So I think the biggest thing for them is that they just don't have any real consistent offensive punch, and their rim protection is questionable. Now it's game one. It's game one, so you don't want to overblow it. But I think that monitoring DeAndre Ayton's ability to be a legitimate rim protector and even just a high level rebounder for this team, if he can be the double Ayton that he was for the Portland Trailblazers, it's more impactful on this team. I said that last episode. Him being 16-10 for the Portland Trailblazers is not the same thing as him being 16-10 for the Los Angeles Lakers. Him being 16-10 on the Los Angeles Lakers means that they're getting legitimate productivity from the center position in a way that they literally didn't have last year. Versus the Portland Trailblazers, they had a platoon system of centers that they could run out last year. And DeAndre Ayton may have had the best counting stats, but he wasn't even the most efficient or effective of the group. Honestly, you could make the argument that Donovan Clingan was, despite the fact that he didn't average as many points. He was still a high-level rebounder, and he was easily the best rim protector of that group, right? So DeAndre Ayton as a 16-10 guy for the Lakers is a real upgrade from just having Jackson Hayes in the rotation. So watch that closely. DeAndre Ayton, real issues there. Number two, and that's focusing on the Houston Rockets. Similar positional issue, just different position. The Houston Rockets at point guard, man. The Amen Thompson at point guard experiment is going to be one of the most interesting storylines of the NBA season if it's something that the Houston Rockets choose to maintain for longer than just a few weeks. Because Amen Thompson, although is a strong ball handler for 6'5", he is not a legit point guard style ball handler. One of the things that I noticed throughout that game, and he eventually ended the game with 18 points, went down with a cramping issue in the first overtime game, and basically just, never came back after that. And I think it actually ended up hurting the Houston Rockets significantly, more so on the defensive end and somewhat on the offensive end in terms of having somebody who could help Alperen Sengun and Kevin Durant put pressure on the rim. But the ball handling ability, dealing with NBA pressure, it got to a point where the Oklahoma City Thunder felt very comfortable pressuring him full court, and you could see him struggling to pull the ball, bring the ball up. And because they're playing this jumbo lineup with Jabari Smith, Kevin Durant at the 2, Alperen Sengun at the 4, and Steven Adams at the 5, there's nobody else outside of maybe Kevin Durant that they were able to truly rely on to help bring the ball up. So he's struggling to bring the rock up the floor, dealing with this tenacious on-ball pressure from guys like Aaron Wiggins, Cason Wallace, Alex Caruso. And He didn't have a true outlet. Unfortunately, Reed Shepard was no better. Reed Shepard was 2 of 7 from beyond the arc. I believe he was 3 of 12 for the game. Amen Thompson was 0 of 7 from 3. Kevin Durant was 0 of 4 from 3 in this game. Like, the lack of spacing was already going to be a question mark, right? Alperen Sengun was their best three-point shooter by a country mile. He shot 5 of 8 from beyond the arc. It was actually a career high most made threes by Alperen Sengun in this game. And Alperen put on an absolute masterclass. Near 40 ball, honestly was nearing a triple double as well. This is a guy who I think is going to legit make the All-Star team this year. And that's kind of a side thing, but Alperen Sengun is legit going to make the All-Star team this year if he continues to play like what we saw on opening night. And I don't think he's going to be dropping 30 balls every single night, but I think he's taken a step forward with that 3 ball that now gives him a completely different element. If I'm not mistaken, I think Alperen shot like 20-something% from beyond the arc last year. If he can be a 35-36% three-point shooter with the passing vision he already has and his ability to hit that nice floater in the mid-range area, yeah, he's going to be a complete package. He was looking like Dirk Nowitzki last night. I'm not going to lie. And his one-on-one matchups against Chet Holmgren and that OKC front court were definitely special situations for him. And he actually kind of left a little bit on the table, a couple of missed free throws. The Houston Rockets had a good handful of missed free throws that ended up really costing them this game. But that point guard position, the lack of spacing that they have in terms of true knockdown three-point shooters, the inability to really deal with on-ball pressure on the perimeter, because Amen is a good ball handler, but he doesn't have a tight elite level ball handle yet. I'm not saying he has to be Kyrie. I'm not saying he has to be he doesn't have to be Chris Paul. He doesn't have to be Rajon Rondo. I'm not saying any of those things, but he simply needs a tighter ball handle to deal with the kind of on-ball aggressive pressure that can be thrown at him in the NBA. Now, nobody has the kind of speed athletes and positional versatility that the Oklahoma City Thunder do. Nobody in the NBA does. But there are teams that have those quote-unquote defensive specialist guards that their whole MO is full court pressure, a sizable amount of or a respectable amount of hand checking type physicality. And that's going to be an issue for the Houston Rockets. I think another thing that was a big glaring point of not having a point guard was there was even a point, I believe, in the second quarter where the team just seemed to struggle to get anything in rhythm in the half court. And you could see after a turnover, which, if I'm not mistaken, the Houston Rockets had 23 turnovers that led to 26 points. There was a point in the second quarter, they turned the ball over in the half court, and you could see Kevin Durant walk away, and he's mouthing, slow down. And I think that's a representation of what made Fred VanVleet so special last season. I was doing some research, and the thing about the Houston Rockets that's already a difference between game one of this season and everything from last year is the turnovers. And that goes to show the point guard presence. In this game, they turned the ball over 26 times or 23 times, and it led to a lot of Oklahoma City baskets. Oklahoma City scored 16 fast break points in this game. The Houston Rockets only had 2. Last season, the Houston Rockets were a top 10 team in terms of turning the ball over, or in this case, not turning the ball over. They averaged about 13 turnovers a game, which was literally, I think, either 9th or 10th best in the NBA last year. They doubled that in the very first game. Now, again, they played the Oklahoma City Thunder, who was the best defensive unit in basketball last year. They played them on ring night, and you're playing a jumbo lineup against a smaller, more athletic, faster lineup. So there's a couple of things that obviously reigned more in the Oklahoma City Thunder's favor. Nonetheless, something to watch out for, because between their lack of three-point shooting across the board, because I would say their only knockdown three-point shooters truly are probably Kevin Durant and to a lesser degree Jabari Smith Jr., who didn't have a great three-point shooting night himself in this game. And Alper Şengün kind of had a little bit of a coming out party. We'll have to see whether or not that's going to be something that's consistent. If he can be a consistent 35 to 36% 3-point shooter, that makes things a little bit different for them. But I can't say that he's a consistent 3-point shooter because of one game where he had a kind of like a breakout night as a floor spacer. So their only consistent 3-point shooters really within that starting five are Kevin Durant and Jabari Smith Jr. So the spacing is already going to be a question mark. You pair that with the lack of a real decision maker at the point guard position. Now you have a lot of situations where they have to rely on the fact that they're just bigger and stronger because they did win the rebounding battle by nearly 20. They have to rely on being bigger and stronger to win in the half court because the decision making is not there to get easy offense through being able to do strong backdoor cuts, high level passing, bringing the ball up and creating transition within a half court set, right? By being able to be downhill from the inbound to getting downhill, getting to a spot and initiating the offense in the half court as quickly as humanly possible, right? Those things don't come with this jumbo lineup. They just have to rely on the fact that they're bigger, stronger, and able to shoot over the top. And when you're not able to be successful in doing that, a la Kevin Durant, who was held relatively in check in this game, he finished the night with 23 points, jacked up my parlay because of the fact that he was supposed to score at least 25. But that's neither here nor there. It's a question mark for Houston. That point guard position, it sounds cute, the jumbo lineup. Houston Rockets jumbo lineup was interesting. And in some situations, they were effective. But when it comes to things like late game execution and the ability to get things consistently done in the half court in terms of finding efficient shot creation, they still have big questions. And Kevin Durant is a knockdown shooter. He is one of the best ISO scorers in the NBA. He is not a facilitator. So sliding him to the point guard position or having him do most of the on-ball initiation duties is not a solution either, which means that the Houston Rockets have a point guard problem. Excuse me. Last but not least, my third biggest takeaway from opening night. This is an overarching thing. Yo, the West is about to be nuts. The Western Conference, we already knew, right? Duh, the Denver Nuggets get better. Oklahoma City's coming off of the championship. You get a full season of Luka Doncic in a Lakers uniform coming off of him hitting the Ozempic. Like, everything points to this Western Conference is going to be insane. But game one was a double overtime game with just about everything you could ask for. Big time shots, physical defense, controversial calls. Kevin Durant hitting the Chris Webber that didn't get called. Like, it had everything. Even the Los Angeles Lakers versus Warriors game. That game was relatively out of reach. Buddy Hield was knocking down threes. Jonathan Kuminga was going crazy off the bench. Or, excuse me, he actually, got some real starter minutes in this game. Steph Curry was held to like 18 points. Luka dropped 43. But like towards the top portion of the fourth quarter, it was 101 to 99. At one point, the Warriors were up by about 13, 14 points. And all of a sudden, the Lakers were within striking distance. That quickly. This Western Conference is going to be absolutely nuts. And I'm not gonna lie, I think any West versus West game is going to feel like it has playoff contention behind it. And that sounds nuts when you also have to factor in teams like the San Antonio Spurs or the Utah Jazz. Like, I understand that there's teams that you're going to have to, like, you have to see it first in terms of, like, where do they really stack up against the rest of the NBA. But like that Western Conference, like, I don't think there's going to be any easy nights in the Western Conference at all. I mean, maybe, like I said, maybe a team like the Jazz. I think the Spurs are going to be a lot better this year, even though they're going to be without, Chris Paul. I think their guard rotation with Ron Harper, with De'Aaron Fox, with Stephon Castle, I think it's still going to be relatively good. So they're in a solid space. We'll have to see, man. But the Western Conference looks like it's going to be an absolute demon. And coming across a 55 plus team this year, man, if you win 60 games in the Western Conference, you're just flat out special. And I think the Oklahoma City Thunder have a chance to do it. I think the Denver Nuggets have a chance to do it, but only time will tell. Let's move on to a more player centric topic. Let's talk about my potential breakout candidates for this season. Now, I'm going to start with Cooper Flag, and it's because I feel like he's an easy one. I feel like he's a quick one, and I feel like it's one that everybody's going to cling to. I'm just going to join the bandwagon on this one. And I'm going to take it a step further because I think that Cooper Flag has a chance to be in the All-Star conversation this year. I know that there's thoughts. I know there's been reports from, you know, Jason Kidd and stuff like that about the idea of not running Cooper at the point guard position. And I get that. The idea of Cooper Flag being the point, it always felt like a mook situation. You didn't necessarily need to do it, but it was an interesting thing to experiment with. We just obviously saw the jumbo lineup from the Houston Rockets, and it's not that it didn't work. It's just that the floor spacing and decision making wasn't there. And I think that Cooper Flag is still in like too early in his development as a on ball shot creator, both for himself and for others, to the point that I don't necessarily know if he would be any better than Amen Thompson as a ball handler and decision maker in the half court. I think he has a little bit more of a fluid game. I think he's more likely to be a more effective mid-range shooter. But Amen Thompson was 8 of 10 in the 2-point area in that game. Cooper Flag, I think, can be consistent from the mid-range area. He's not really a floor spacer himself. He's very willing to take it, but he's not necessarily a floor spacer in his own right. But I think that he's going to be a guy that just like, he has to be, the second best player on this team while Kyrie Irving is out. He has to step into that role because whether the Dallas Mavericks like it or not, Nico Harrison has put a lot of pressure on this team to be good right away. Regardless of the fact that they got the number one overall pick and it feels like it buys them more time because Cooper has developed, blah, blah. No. You traded Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers because you felt like you wanted to be in a win now situation where over the next 3 to 5 years, built off of a defensive infrastructure led by Anthony Davis, you feel like you could contend better off of the quote-unquote defense wins championships mantra. So you traded arguably a top 5 player in the NBA. Not even arguably. You traded a top 5 player in the league right now for an injury-prone center in Anthony Davis, who, when he is healthy, is a top 10, top 12 player in the league, but is a guy that is older than Luka Doncic and not nearly as impactful as Luka Doncic, despite the fact that he's more of a two-way player. So that puts a lot of onus on Cooper Flag to be good right away. And I think Cooper has the potential to be that good. Do I think Cooper can average 18 to 20 points a night, be a 6-7 rebound per night kind of guy, and shoot 35% from beyond the arc, be a legit play finisher for this team? Yes. I do. And that's why I think that it's going to be a real breakout year for him. I think that Cooper Flag is going to be in a similar conversation that Victor Wembanyama was in not last year, his rookie year, where it was like, hey, I know this isn't normal, but like, do we have to at least consider the rookie as an all-star this upcoming year? I think there's going to be real cause to pause when it comes to Cooper Flag, where you're going to have to step back, look at his stats, and ask yourself, like, can we legitimately leave him out of the All-Star game? I don't know that for certain, but I think NBA brass is going to be looking at Cooper Flag by the midway point of the NBA season, and they're going to have to ask themselves whether or not they can, in confidence, leave this guy out of the All-Star game, because I think he's just going to be that special. I think he's going to be that good defensively on the perimeter because he can guard 1s through 4s, and I think he can even guard small ball 5s if I'm being honest with you. Pair that with the fact that I think he has a very fluid mid-range game. He's a very, very good backdoor cutter. He's a good play finisher. And I think he's a guy that has the kind of intensity on both sides of the floor that's going to make him a real two-way player. I'm taking it right now. Cooper Flag is going to make the All-Star team. And if he doesn't make the All-Star team, he's going to be sitting right there on the outside of the votes as a guy who just barely missed it in his rookie year. Mark my words. Cooper Flag has the tools, the moxie, and I think the two-way ability to be considered a top 10 two-way player in the NBA by the All-Star break. And I think he's going to have to be at least in consideration for one of those All-Star spots. Another guy who I think is going to be interesting in terms of an All-Star conversation is going to be out in the Eastern Conference, and that's Brandon Miller. Now, I don't have as much hope for him to make the All-Star game this season as I do for Cooper Flag, and that's kind of ironic given that actually the Eastern Conference would be easier to make the All-Star game in, especially given the fact that two of their main guys in Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton will be missing for the beginning of the year, and you have guys like Joel Embiid, who's going to be not playing back-to-backs. Paul George is likely to not play significantly throughout this season. He already is questionable going into game one. But Brandon Miller, I think, is going to be special. Last year, he only played 27 games, but he averaged 21 points, 4.9 rebounds, 3.6 assists, shot 86% from the free throw line, shot 35%, which is league average from beyond the arc on 10 3-point attempts per game. Mind you, the year before he shot 37% on just under 7 attempts. So he still shot league average while upping his 3-point volume by 4. He shot nearly 11 3-point attempts per game, and he shot 40% from the field, which I think can improve. He shot 44% from beyond the arc. He shot 44% from the floor the year prior. I think that his 3-point volume increasing was really just the biggest difference between obviously his 3-point percentage and his overall percentage from the field. Brandon Miller was on par to being a fringe all-star last season had he been healthy. Now, he only played 27 games, like I said, but 21, 5, and 4 on, relatively decent efficiency is going to put you in the all-star conversation. And I think this year, the Charlotte Hornets have much more consistent, just more consistent real NBA player play across the board. You have Miles Bridges. You bring in Colin Kneppel, who I think is a ready now NBA player, and I think deserves to start. I think he should be the starting small forward. Honestly, I think they should play a small ball lineup that has LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Colin Kneppel, Miles Bridges, and like Ryan Kalkbrenner or Miles Plumlee, Mason Plumlee at the center position. And I wouldn't even say that's a small ball lineup. Actually, that's pretty sizable because I think all of those guys would be 6'7", 6'8", or above. So that would actually be a pretty solid lineup across the board that has positional versatility and size. But Brandon Miller, I think, is going to average 21 to 23 points this year. Knock on wood that he's able to play a full season healthy, or at least be able to hit the 65 game minimum. He is a guy that I think is a real good on-ball shot creator. I think they need to trust him with the ball in his hands a little bit more to initiate offense. I think there was glimpses of that last year. And he is a player that I think is going to be a driving force for this Charlotte Hornets team if they want to be something more than just the team they've been, which is at best making the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference and getting thumped in the first round of the play-in tournament. If they want to be any more than what they've been in the LaMelo Ball era, it's going to be on the back of, obviously, LaMelo Ball being healthy, but secondarily, Brandon Miller taking another step forward. They've positioned themselves to have more consistent real NBA player play, right? Over the last season and a half, they've just gotten more guys that are just good at the game of basketball, right? They brought in Grant Williams. They had Seth Curry at one point. Now they have Colin Sexton, who reports are saying has been a real good vocal leader in the locker room for them. You have Trey Mann on this roster, who I think is a really good player, and if it wasn't for injury last season, I think was in real contention to be like a 6th man of the year candidate last season. Like, they have real competent, I think that's the word, competent basketball players on this team, and sometimes competency is just enough to help your basketball team be more effective on a night-to-night basis. You pair that with the fact that I think they have 2 real stars in that backcourt with Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball. My early season prediction is that I think that the Charlotte Hornets are going to finish as one of the top 8 seeds in the Eastern Conference. Whether that's 7 through 10 more particularly is the biggest question. I think that it's going to be one of the 7. It's going to be, if they finish top 8, it's going to be 7 or 8. And then the question will simply be, what can they get done in the play-in tournament in terms of advancing? Can they win in the first round and secure their spot in the playoffs? Or do they kind of have to play 2 games and risk being eliminated? That's the biggest question. But I think that the Charlotte Hornets, now with competent ball players on the roster from the very beginning of the season, I think there's a real chance that the Charlotte Hornets are going to finish with a top 8 record in the Eastern Conference this season. And on top of that, I think that they will be a game or two away from actually making the playoffs. And if they're a playoff team this year with LaMelo Ball, that'll be an interesting watch. That's going to be an interesting watch. I don't think they win a series, but it'll be an interesting watch nonetheless. Let's move on to my NBA League Pass teams. And the 2 teams that I'm locking in on this year. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan, by the way, just to throw that out for anybody who does not know me personally. Big fan of Chicago Bulls. Not necessarily from the Jordan era. I am 27 or about to be 27 years old. It's not necessarily from the Jordan era. He won his last championships around the time I was born. I am more built out of the Derrick Rose era. Derrick Rose is easily my favorite player in basketball history. That's a story for a different day, maybe an off-season story time. Nonetheless, if I am not watching Chicago Bulls basketball, I will be watching the Orlando Magic. If I am not watching Chicago Bulls basketball, I will be watching the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, obviously, with this being my job and with this being something that I want to do as a long-term career, every game shall be watched. But if there are 2 teams that I will be locking in on this year, it's the Magic and the Pelicans. Let me explain. I'm going to start with the Pelicans because they're the easier sell. Skinny Zion is just a marvelous storyline to keep tabs on. Like, duh. Same way everybody was infatuated with the Skinny Luca stuff, where he comes on the cover of a sports magazine looking completely cut up, very different. It felt like a direct response to some of the things that were said negatively about him from the people like Nico Harrison in the Mavericks front office. The same thing could be said for Zion Williamson. Like, Zion Williamson making this transformation, we've seen him do physical transformations in lesser degrees before. This is probably the most drastic version of it. Watching Zion in the open floor in a more healthy manner, I think is going to be both interesting to see how he is as a play finisher, because his burly size and physicality was one of the biggest things that made him such a draw coming out of high school and especially coming out of Duke. Now that he's a lot slimmer, maybe he's not as physically dominating, but his first step was already one of the better ones at the power forward position to begin with. Now, at a reduced size, that first step looks even more dangerous. His ability to finish around the rim, if he's able to be more effective as a rim finisher now, because the size doesn't hold him back as much and the impact hitting the ground doesn't hold him back as much, he should be able to have a healthier season. I believe he played 71 games last year. If he's able to do that again this season, that could be big for the New Orleans Pelicans. I think that Trey Murphy III back healthy, I think that's a dude that should be on everybody's breakout candidate list, because I feel like now with Brandon Ingram gone, they are going to give the keys to Trey Murphy III to really unlock himself as an on-ball shot creator at the 3. This New Orleans Pelicans team, there's some questions, right? Jeremiah Fears as the point guard for them. What does that look like? Obviously, Kevon Looney is starting the season injured. Yves Messi is going to be somebody that gets a lot of burn in the beginning. But what does it look like when you have Yves Messi and then you have a veteran like Kevon Looney in the lineup as well? Obviously, you still have Jose Alvarado. You still have Herb Jones. Like, this team is very similar to the New Orleans Pelicans of 2025 is very similar to those Indiana Pacers teams with Victor Oladipo. They feel like a team where they have a guy who feels like a fringe all-star, could be a top 10 player in the NBA. That's what Victor Oladipo was at one point for the Indiana Pacers. Regardless of whatever you say, that man helped push the Miami Heat to a 7-game series in a day and age where the Miami Heat looked absolutely unstoppable with the big 3, right? And The Indiana Pacers were able to do that with Victor Oladipo as their best player. So yes, he was a fringe top 10, top 15 player in the NBA at the time. And I think that the when healthy caveat for Zion Williamson is very similar to that. And then you have a lot of very effective starters who are good within their role with upside to maybe present a bigger issue to certain teams. I think Trey Murphy as a floor spacer, very dangerous. I think his ability to shoot the three at a high clip is going to make him one of the best knockdown 3-point shooters this upcoming season. And I think they're going to give him the ball a lot more this year to do more as an on-ball initiator. Herb Jones, all NBA caliber defender on a night to night basis. Jose Alvarado, scrappy defender, effective defender on a night to night basis. This team, I think, is going to be really interesting. And the biggest question is going to be around Zion's health and what does he look like now with this complete physique change in terms of what type of skill set he used to rely on versus the things that he is going to be able to do now. Let's move on to the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic are an interesting team for me, not only because in my personal work slash what my actual occupation is, one of the teams that I cover very closely is the Orlando Magic. So I familiarized myself with them a lot this summer. But the storyline around the Orlando Magic is as follows. The Orlando Magic are projected to be the third best team in the Eastern Conference behind the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks. Paulo Banchero is seen to be a player that has the chance to take a leap into the MVP conversation. ESPN ranked him as a top 20 player coming into the season. Other player rankings have had him as a fringe top 25 to top 20 player in the NBA with a chance to take a leap this season. Franz Wagner, very similarly, has been mocked anywhere between 35 and 45 in terms of top 100 rankings over this past summer. And he's a guy that has a chance to take an all-star leap as well. Desmond Bane in the Eastern Conference is much more likely to be in all-star consideration and is a guy that already has shown he can be a 20-point per game scorer that can knock down threes at a 40% clip. And that's one of the biggest issues that the Orlando Magic dealt with last season. They were the worst three-point shooting team by a country mile last year. And it was one of the biggest things that held them back. That and the fact that they were so significantly injured last year. There's a stat that came out that said that the trifecta of Paulo Banchero, Jalen Suggs, and Franz Wagner only played a combined 7 games together on the floor last season when they went 41 and 41. That goes to show you how injured they were, that their 3 best players last season were practically staggered in terms of their injury situations. And so we didn't get to see what they really were as a basketball team, taking that step forward after pushing the Cleveland Cavaliers to 7 games the season prior. To go a step further than that, this is an Orlando Magic team that upgraded across the board, I felt like, in a real way, not just with Desmond Bane, but with getting Tyus Jones as the backup point guard. Now, again, another thing that if people don't know me, Tyus Jones is my favorite backup point guard in the league. He's easily my most intriguing 6-man in the NBA. I know, weird infatuation, but he fits the archetype of your traditional point guard in the modern NBA where he can shoot the 3 ball at a high clip. He's a good decision maker. He doesn't turn the ball over. Has had one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the NBA practically his entire career. Was the most effective with the Memphis Grizzlies. Some of these other stops like Washington and Phoenix, they were all tricky fits. But when he was the backup point guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, he had one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the NBA. John Morant would miss time, and that Memphis Grizzlies team would still go like 8-2 while John Morant was on the bench trying to get back healthy, right? He's just a steady basketball player. And for the Orlando Magic, one of the biggest things that hurt them last season and really hurt them in that postseason against the Cleveland Cavaliers was just that they didn't have anybody who could help settle them down. Yes, there was a lack of shot creation from Franz Wagner. Yes, it felt like Paulo Banchero practically was backpacking that offense. But a lot of that had to do with the fact that they just could not get themselves into easy half-court offense. It kind of alludes very similarly to what I was saying about the Houston Rockets earlier in the podcast with Ahmed Thompson. Now, Jalen Suggs is an efficient player. Last year, he had a breakout year as a three-point shooter. well, last year he continued what was a breakout shooting year the year prior as a 3-point shooter. He's not a high level passer, though. He's a good decision maker with the basketball, but he's not a high level passer. He's not somebody that you necessarily are, going into the half court and we're going to run 7 straight floppy action plays where I need you to be able to hit the screen. I need you to be able to hit the roll man off the screen with an efficient pocket pass to create an easy mid-range floater slash jump shot opportunity. Like, no offense to Jalen Suggs, but he's just not that guy that you can continuously run efficient half-court offense through at the point guard position. Tyus Jones gives you a different flow. I think that Anthony Black is going to be really effective off the bench for this team. He's going to be more aggressive. I think he understands that he already has the defensive chops at 6'9" to guard in space. I think he can guard 1s through 3s. I think he can guard small ball 4s because he has the physical gifts as an athlete to maybe guard in space against the 4s. You have Tristan da Silva, who had a really strong Eurobasket. Team Germany with him and Franz Wagner won the whole dang thing. And Tristan was a knockdown three-point shooter throughout all of Eurobasket. If that translates during the regular season for the Orlando Magic, you now have Tristan da Silva, Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones. You draft Jace Richardson, who had a really strong summer league and preseason, was one of the top 5 rookies in preseason. And was one. I think he was the best 3-point shooter in preseason. Shot 70% from beyond the arc, in those 4 games. And you look at the makeup of that team now, and you're like, wait a minute, they have real floor spacing. Paolo Banchero is already one of the best players in the NBA at drawing foul contact. He's been averaging at least 8 free throw attempts per game since his rookie year. Franz Wagner averages about 5 to 6 free throw attempts per game. He had a game in the preseason where he got to the line 10 times. If Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner can get to the line and combine 17 to 20, 21 times a night, pair that with the fact that they now have efficient 3-point shooting around them, this is a team that has real offensive upside. Mind you, this team last season, even without Jalen Suggs, who was the linchpin of their defense on the perimeter, they were the second best defense in the NBA last year. The biggest foible for the Orlando Magic has been offensively, they've been a bottom 5 offense every year in the Paolo Banchero era. And more particularly, the Orlando Magic have been a bottom 10 offense since the Dwight Howard era. A bottom 10 offense since the Dwight Howard era. So, real floor spacing, efficiency from the bench with guys like Tristan da Silva, Anthony Black, and Tyus Jones coming off the bench, and a team that just has more to fight for this year. Last year, they were so injury riddled that just making the playoffs and getting into that series against the Boston Celtics was just good experience for them. But this year, I don't necessarily think there's quote-unquote championship aspirations, but I think that this is a good litmus test for them, right? The Orlando Magic have to get out of the first round this year. They have to. Otherwise, there's going to be some real wholesale changes, and it's going to start with questioning the duo of Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. Why? Because people are already doing it. People are doing the same thing with Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner that they were doing with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, where it's like, they're a little redundant. They both kind of need the ball in their hands a certain amount to be the most effective. They both play repetitive position. Are they actually just stunting each other's growth by getting in each other's way? Now, we saw how that worked out. Once you got competent ball play at the point guard position, and you got consistent 3-point spacing across the board, both on the perimeter and from players like Al Horford, and winning a championship. I think the Orlando Magic are in a similar conversation for that. I think the Orlando Magic, with this move of Desmond Bane, with this move of Tyus Jones, if they can get more consistent play from Wendell Carter Jr., who's been kind of in and out when it comes to the Orlando Magic, given the fact that he has a real, injury history of his own. The Orlando Magic can be the Boston Celtics. I know that sounds kind of nuts, but they can. They have a very similar infrastructure to the Boston Celtics if you look at it. Star forward, that can be an MVP caliber player. That was Jason Tatum for the Celtics. For the Orlando Magic, Paolo Banchero. Check. Solid secondary ball creator, positional size, able to get his shot, can be effective in the half court, also very dangerous in the open floor. That was Jaylen Brown for the Boston Celtics. Franz Wagner. Defensive oriented point guard with the ability to knock down threes at a high enough clip. In their championship year, that was Drew Holiday. Knockdown 3-point shooter and secondary ball handler, tertiary ball handler, good decision maker, and somebody who can also hit the three ball at a high enough clip. That was that's Derek White. That for the Orlando Magic now is Desmond Bane. Now I think Derek White is a much better defender than Desmond Bane, but nonetheless, similar archetype for what the Orlando Magic are asking of him in comparison to someone like Derek White and what he's asked to do and what he was asked to do in that championship run for the Boston Celtics. And then at center, a floor spacing big that can be an effective rim protector against some of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, more particularly guys like Giannis Antetokounmpo, guys like Joel Embiid. And that's what Al Horford was for them in that championship run. And that's what Wendell Carter Jr. has to be for the Orlando Magic. And unironically, Wendell Carter Jr. was compared to Al Horford coming out of that draft class when he was picked up by the Chicago Bulls. The Orlando Magic can be the Boston Celtics. They legitimately can. They have the infrastructure built for them to be that kind of team. The question is just whether or not certain guys can take the strides to reach that level of being that good. Because the biggest separator for the Boston Celtics, besides personnel, is that they were the best three-point shooting team in the league, if not a top 5 three-point shooting team in the league the last 2 seasons. Orlando's not that. So they have to be a facsimile of that in a different way. Does that mean dominating the offensive and defensive glass? Does that mean that they are one of the best teams in terms of getting to the free throw line at a high clip? Those are the questions, because they're not going to be a good enough three-point shooting team to match what the Boston Celtics have been over the last 2 years. They're just not, even with the personnel changes they've made. But can they be Boston Celtics dominant in a different way? That's going to be one of the biggest question marks for me for them this upcoming season. Is they have the roster built. They're deep at point guard and shooting guard, or at least they're deep as far as the backcourt's considered in terms of what kind of flexibility they have within the lineup within their backcourt. They had 2 studs at the power forward and small forward position. The question is just like, what are you going to do with it? And what does it look like in year 1 with Desmond Bane as the third option for this team? So as a recap, New Orleans Pelicans, I just want to see what Zion Williamson does. This might be the last time I get on the Zion Williamson bandwagon. And that's going to have a lot to do with how this New Orleans Pelicans team plays this season, and more particularly, how is Zion Williamson this upcoming year. And then for the Orlando Magic, they're a team that I obviously cover in my spare time as part of, or they're a team that I cover as part of my work. But also, they are an intriguing basketball team because they have really high expectations as a young squad. The Oklahoma City Thunder had very high expectations last season as a young basketball team. They went on to be the second youngest team to win a championship in NBA history. I don't know if the Orlando Magic are that, but I think they have the build roster-wise to really be dangerous in this version of the East, especially with teams like Boston and Indiana having real question marks in terms of who their lead guy is going to be this upcoming season and what that means for their team, for the course of 82 games. So with that being said, those are my 3 main topics for today's episode. I'm going to be ending today's episode the same way I ended last episode, which is just going to be my shameless plug. I'm going to do this pretty frequently throughout the first week of the podcast just to kind of help push, the momentum, and kind of also hold myself accountable of recording Monday through Friday. So shameless plug, you can catch Routine Jumper daily Monday through Friday, and I'll also be recording other interesting content as well, reaction content to different articles, YouTube videos from some of your favorite podcasters and creators in the NBA space, as well as maybe some other challenges and things that are more of the TikTok video style. I also record a podcast called The Magic Latest, where I cover the Orlando Magic very closely. I did my first Orlando Magic centric parlay on there, and I may be doing some other like parlay style content here on the Routine Jumper podcast and short form videos as well. So basically, this is a twofold. This is me telling you that Monday through Friday, you are going to get consistent, full fledged NBA coverage from the Routine Jumper page. That's number one. Number two is you're going to get consistent short form content, whether that comes in the form of Twitter posts. I was very active on Twitter last night during opening night, especially during that Houston Rockets game, live tweeting throughout the game. You can expect that to be done very consistently throughout the NBA season as well as maybe some Twitter style posts that are posted here on the YouTube platform and on TikTok. Last but not least, there'll be other content outside of the podcast that gets posted on the page, like reaction content and other types of challenges. Think of your Enjoy Basketballs, think about Pick a Side podcast, things of those nature that are really good at providing, real evergreen content for you guys to enjoy as well. So that's going to be another big part of what Routine Jumper is going to be doing this upcoming season. We are going to be covering every step of the way for this NBA season. I'm excited. Like I said in the last podcast, this has been something I've wanted to do for quite some time, and it's taken a long time for me to muster up the courage to really put this project together. But I'm leaning into it, and regardless if I record early in the morning, late at night, doesn't matter. I'm going to be getting these episodes up every single day, and I'm going to be trying to get content out on the page every single day, covering every single second, every single dribble of NBA basketball this year, and I'm very excited to do so. With that being said, thank you for watching and listening. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Routine Jumper content covering everything NBA basketball. And yeah, man, thank you for listening to yet another episode of the Routine Jumper podcast. I will see you guys tomorrow. We will have an insane amount of NBA basketball games to discuss and takeaways to overreact to after tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. And until tomorrow, I'll see you guys later. Peace.